On the day it happened, I experienced unbearable physical pain. It seemed that nothing could relieve me. However, something happened that I still remember. I was paralyzed with fear. It was such an intense experience that it left an indelible mark on my soul forever. Things could have been different, since I really died, not figuratively. Specifically, the doctors present tried to revive me, but in reality, I continued to exist in another form, and what I observed on the other side was astonishing. I remained dead for 15 minutes, but to me, that time felt like an eternity. He spoke about the beginning of his extraordinary journey to another world, a young man named McCormack, whose experience of being in the afterlife ended in a very peculiar way. Shortly before these events, in 1980, he moved to the island of Mauritius. This destination appealed to him because it was considered ideal for surfing, an activity he deeply loved. At that time, he was only 24 years old, and it seemed like he had a whole life ahead of him, but it was not so. Something happened quickly. He developed with such speed and in a direction he would never have imagined, living a quiet life in a tropical region. McCormack did not pay much attention to the World Cup, and one day, he gave in to his friend's insistence, and they went out at night to fish on one of the beautiful reefs where he could dive to catch more crabs. At first, everything went well and the young man enthusiastically collected a good amount of catch. But before he returned home, the beam of his flashlight revealed something emerging from the darkness of the night sea, a silhouette that looked a bit like a squid. McCormack was curious to know what kind of creature it was and decided to catch it. The young man was wearing special diving gloves, so when he tried to grab what he thought was a squid, it slipped through his fingers. It was then that McCormack realized that it was, in fact, a jellyfish he had never seen before. Its head was bell-shaped and long transparent tentacles extended behind it. The young man was distracted for a moment, completely losing sight of the creature in the water, but suddenly he felt something burning his hand. Since the pain was not intense, he continued diving in search of crayfish. While doing so, he was stung several more times by a jellyfish, which was not good. An intuition came over the young man, and he understood that it was necessary to finish the night dive. Unfortunately, the waves had taken him away from the boat, so he had to swim a certain distance to reach it. He could do it without difficulty, but what he saw on his way filled him with terror. Suddenly, crossing that distance became truly terrifying. The fact is that he found a whole swarm of these jellyfish. One of them came very close to his face. To avoid being stung in the face, he pushed the jellyfish away with his hand and felt 2 painful impacts on it. By some miracle, he managed to endure the intense pain and reach the boat. As he got on, McCormack checked his hands. They were covered in wounds and swollen blisters. At that moment, his friend swam towards the boat. Seeing him, the boat turned pale and showed signs of fear, with a worried expression on his face. He asked, "Who stung you like that?" And upon receiving the answer, he turned even paler and asked how long it had been since you had been burned. Upon hearing your answer, the friend exclaimed breathlessly, "Sir, we need to go to the hospital immediately. These jellyfish are extremely poisonous. Even if you only get one sting from such a creature, it will be all over for you. And you have several. It is a miracle that you are still alive." However, McCormack was no longer able to answer. He was in a very bad state and sensed that something was wrong with him. He even felt himself beginning to faint. Upon reaching the shore, his companion left McCormack on the boat and rushed to get help. It was then that the young man understood, with irrefutable evidence, that he was dying, and suddenly he heard a voice saying to him, "If you close your eyes now, you will never wake up again." He looked around in the hope of seeing someone nearby, but he found no one. Perhaps it was his guardian angel or his own conscience that was speaking to him. Finally, his friend returned accompanied by assistants and helped him into the car. As they sped down the dark road to the hospital, his soul had already begun to separate from his body, and a disturbing image emerged in front of him. He saw a blond-haired boy in front of him who began to grow rapidly before his eyes. Watching this as if it were a scene from a movie, the young man realized that he was looking at his own reflection. His whole life flashed before his eyes, and he felt unable to be frightened when he saw that the last episode of his life would be the end. Everything was over. Because Marmok understood what it was like. The review of a whole life precedes the transition from our mortal existence to the other world. At least that is what those who experience clinical death had mentioned. This is how he himself recounted that intense period of my life. Now, with complete clarity, I understood that I was facing imminent death. I asked myself, what will happen to me next? Someday, when I pass away, I will face it clearly and consciously. I saw my mother in front of me. She assured me that in difficult moments I can ask God for help and He will forgive me. Even though I was far away from my mother, she was always by my side throughout her life, a deeply devout person. However, I, in contrast, being an atheist, was not only unaware of the existence of a creator, but also wholeheartedly tried to ridicule her beliefs. The stories were, in some ways, partly influenced by divine moments. My mother was a very patient woman and simply assured me that one day I would understand everything and profoundly change my views on everything. At that moment, and even now, I feel that his advice was valuable. I started to pray, but because of my firm atheism, I did not know any religion. I began to formulate prayers and requests to God in my own words. I asked the Almighty to forgive me for all the wrongs I had committed in life. So I promised Him that if I remained alive, I would fulfill His will. At that very moment, the machine was on and I was being taken to the hospital. Maker's IOC ended up in Old Poor, a rather desolate hospital. However, the doctors immediately began to worry about him, as did the nurses, who looked at him with concern and worried faces. McCormack realized that his situation was critical. For him, there was no chance of recovery. The fear was evident. They seemed to be one step ahead of him. They decided to bury him. It was obvious that they did not believe in his survival. However, for the moment, the young man stood firm and fell unconscious. Upon reopening his eyes, McCormack noticed that the lights in the room where he had been admitted were off. His first question was, why did the doctors turn off the lights? What place is this? To avoid panicking, the young man began to calm down, hoping that his eyes would soon adjust to the darkness and he would be able to distinguish objects in it. However, this did not happen. In the darkness, I tried to locate the light switch, but it was nowhere to be found. Then, I tried to find at least something, but the young man could not stumble. He tried to look at his hand, brought it to his face, but pierced it himself, and only then did Mom begin to understand that she did not have a physical body, and yet she felt as before. This is how he himself recounted those events. I wanted to find my physical body. I walked in the darkness without feeling that someone was watching me. Remember with me that feeling when walking. You walk down the street at night and suddenly feel as if someone is watching you, feeling fear. At that moment, I felt, with all my being, the evil that was slowly approaching me from all directions. At that moment, a gloomy, ominous voice, similar to the hiss of a snake, resounded in the darkness. You deserve to be here. The fear I felt was so intense that I literally froze for a moment. I didn't know how to escape from that gloomy place, so I called out to God again. Why am I here? I asked you. Forgive me for everything. Of course, my complaints against the Creator were really absurd. Suddenly, a bright light appeared above me and literally pulled me out of the darkness. I began to feel drawn to a kind of luminosity. Another, Kinder voice asked, tell me, do you want to return to Earth? I was surprised that someone in another world knew my name. Then, a beam of light that my soul ascended to became more transparent, and I began to observe what was behind me. I saw green onions, a crystal-clear stream flowing, and trees growing along its banks, which, curiously, glowed with amazing colors. Contemplating this scene, my mother felt as if a newborn was observing this world with eyes full of admiration. I did not want to say goodbye to such beauty, but then I saw the image of my brother and my mother, who loved me more than anything in life. Then I heard a voice coming from the light again. You can stay here if you want, but I know that if you don't come back, people won't. Investigate what you saw and take responsibility for revealing the truth about what awaits a person after death. This is what Marmok himself commented on my experiences at that instant. For me, I wanted to go back and tell my mother that her beliefs are real. Then Sveta's voice told me, Now open your eyes. After that, I found myself back in my body. I saw a doctor, who probably didn't suspect that I was alive, because when our eyes met, he turned pale as a sheet and almost lost his balance. The nurses watched me with surprise and concern. I remained amazed and horrified for several days. I still had no feeling in my hands and asked, "God, help me heal." As I prayed, I felt a tingling and comforting warmth throughout my body. That's how I managed to heal completely. It is the responsibility of the otherworldly to declare that space is not a fiction and that everyone anticipates the continuation of life beyond our mortal existence. Simply, someone will go to hell, another to heaven, but everyone will have their continuation. The story that a professor named Gorko lived was no less dramatic. He also, by will and destiny, visited places where living people are not allowed to enter. This is how he himself narrated this experience. I used to think that all the answers lay in science. I was a university professor and headed a department. I was convinced that the human being is the judge and measure of everything. I did not believe in God and thought that only madmen believe in him. I myself determined what is good and what is bad. Where does truth lie, and where does it not? I used to rely solely on myself and was a very reserved person, but everything changed when Howard was 38 years old. Storm experienced a clinical death, after which, according to him, he came to a place that could be called the threshold of hell and what he observed there. All this will not go unnoticed by anyone. Shocking events began when he, along with his wife and a small group of students, were traveling through Europe. That day they stopped in Paris, on a Saturday. After walking through the city back to the hotel, he experienced very intense pain in his stomach, fell to the ground and suffered unbearable torment. He felt like there was something inside him, something burning. That was how he was. He related this to me when he shocked me. He felt so bad that I had to call an ambulance. I was taken to the hospital, where I was informed that I had a hole in my stomach and that I required emergency surgery. However, the hospital I went to did not have a surgeon available, so I had to lie down waiting for the operation without receiving care. When the nurse returned to my room to check on me and tell me that there was still no doctor, Storm felt his strength abandon him and he told his wife that he was going to die. Storm had no faith in God, therefore, he did not believe in the existence of the human soul after death. The professor understood that his life had come to an end, forever oppressed by pride and self-pity. Howard did not want to die in anonymity, in a cold hospital bed, but he could no longer bear this mental pain. Howard Storm, in relation to his senseless death, lost consciousness. That was what he commented on those further events. I regained consciousness and was shocked to discover that just a few minutes earlier I was dying and had suddenly managed to get out of bed. This made me feel very good. I felt no pain at all. The only thing that disturbed me was what I saw in my bed. There was a man lying there who looked like me. However, it was not me, as he was standing next to me. A person cannot be in two places at the same time, which immediately scared me, so I decided not to look at the bed where that man was lying. After I moved away, Howard Storm noticed that the bed was half open. The door to the room in the hospital hallway was dark. In that dimness, he observed several strange figures. They called him Storm. He asked him, "Did you come to take me to surgery?" In response, he heard, "We know what you need. We know everything about you. Follow us." Howard Storm left the room and ran down the hospital hallway after those figures, thinking that he should have left. They took him to the surgeon for a long time while Howard Storm finally failed to notice what was in his path. Paths disappeared, even the weakest sources of light were lost in the darkness. Now, Howard Storm is starting to question what his mistake was in getting out of bed. He decided to ask his assistant, "When will we finally get to the operating room?" However, one of them replied that there was no time to ask questions at that moment, stressing that every minute was crucial. As his anxiety increased, he continued to ask questions and the answers became clearer and clearer. Finally, he decided not to go any further until he got the necessary explanations. This is how he himself described his amazing experience. "I thought it was strange and honestly, I didn't try to tell the creatures that I'm scared of until they answered me. A voice, coming from the darkness, whispered, "They were almost there," but I didn't believe them anymore. I stopped and suddenly felt someone starting to push and pull me. In the dim light, I tried to get away from everyone who was attacking me. After that, they started to scratch me. I think there were a lot of them because I kept moving away incessantly and they pounced on me with greater force. I felt as if parts of my body were being torn apart, and at the same time, hysterical and terrifying laughter resounded everywhere. What was the meaning of this sinister laughter? By some miracle, I caught the voice of someone who advised me to pray. I didn't do it. I wasn't sure if this was the advice of a guardian angel who never left me, even on the eve of hell, or perhaps it was my own subconscious. Yet somehow, Howard Storm clung to these words as his only and last hope. He began to remember the prayers he had taught me in my childhood. They didn't work very effectively. They were simple, but even those prayers forced those who tormented him to retreat. Howard Storm prayed until the voices quieted down and he was no longer alone. Soon, Howard Storm observed beams of light that began to envelop him. Within these beams, in front of him, scenes from his life unfolded. In one of them, he saw a man arguing sharply with his mother. In another, he was shown how he fought with his father, presenting extremely unpleasant scenes. During this visualization, Howard Storm did not see a single image of himself being praised for some achievement or receiving awards. All of this was also part of his life, but in those episodes it ceased to be relevant. The lives that unfolded at that time made Howard Storm understand that what really matters are his relationships with people as they are. I myself spoke about it when he finally regained consciousness in his real physical body. Then, I saw my wife and immediately explained to her everything I had witnessed and the story. "I'm done, so now I understand that we have been given a short life on earth, only to prepare us for the most important thing: choosing our eternal destiny." The proponents of such a system have an average life expectancy of 10 to 15 additional years. Personally, I am fully convinced that I will reach 100 years of age. Cardiac surgeon Al Swart in Ori, on the principle of maintaining optimal health during surgeries, decided at the age of 95 to end his career as a surgeon and stopped operating, despite persistent requests from his colleagues to continue. His decision was not motivated by age, but by the excellent condition of his heart and body. He chose to devote more time to his loved ones and to activities that gave him true satisfaction, Al Swart recounted in an interview in Ori. In that same conversation, he confidently stated that he would reach 100 years of age. Although such a statement might seem excessively confident, he was confident in his vitality and, indeed, he lived to be 104 years old. Throughout his life, he shared the secrets of his longevity. Al Swart, the cardiac surgery specialist, examined numerous hearts throughout his career. When Ori noticed that, at the age of 90, he was receiving journalists who found him working in the garden, he was installing a new fence. To erect this fence, he needed to remove 70 centimeters of earth from the ditches, place pillars and fill them with concrete. He intended to finish this project in a few days, as he had other commitments. During his work as an assistant to a cardiac surgeon in operations, he shared his plans. Ori was one of the pioneers in initiating open heart surgeries and devoted more than half a century to this specialty. He performed multiple operations every day, some of which could last up to 6 hours. Even after retiring as a senior surgeon, he continued to train young specialists until he was 95 years old and frequently assisted in the operating room to support his colleagues. Ori's interesting observation and excellent health were revealed specifically during his professional work. When analyzing the condition of patients after surgery, he observed that those who adopted a plant-based diet kept their arteries free and flexible. On the other hand, people who opted for a diet rich in animal products often had cholesterol and calcium buildup in their arteries. He shared these findings with his colleagues. He also found that many patients lost limbs due to vascular complications, prompting them to modify their diet to avoid a similar fate. At age 50, Ori decided to completely transform his diet. In the last days of his life, Al Swart Ori was convinced that this dietary change allowed him to maintain his health until he was 98. He said that his joints felt like he was 20 years old, his coordination remained intact, and at age 99 he was still driving an Astrum, taking care of his vehicle. "If any health problems arise, I have no idea about them, he said humorously during his career. He performed numerous heart surgeries. A few years ago, he traveled to Asia to perform open-heart operations and noticed that local residents were suffering from other diseases. Most of his patients had congenital heart defects, while coronary heart disease is very common in developed nations. This is because residents of these areas mainly follow plant-based diets, said cardiac surgeon Al Swart-Ori, a renowned cardiology specialist. He said those who adopt his diet live an additional 10 to 15 years. Even though the food is tasty and he eats it in large quantities, he is strict and maintains a diet that consists of only 2 meals a day, one in the morning and another around 4 p.m. Each morning begins with a generous serving of whole grains. Cereal that I eat with soy milk for breakfast. I also include a variety of fruits and a handful of nuts. In addition, I add whole grain toast with nut butter and drink a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. I shared the orange juice with Ori II. Ori's diet was generally composed of generous portions of beans, raw vegetables, and an indispensable handful of nuts. Although nuts are often considered the most beneficial, I prefer almonds and peanuts. They usually recommend consuming nuts uncooked, but I don't do that, as I sometimes eat salted peanuts. I eliminated white sugar a long time ago, opting to obtain it from fruits and nuts. The cardiologist indicated that the choice of drinks for Ori was no less crucial during adulthood. He consumed only water and orange juice, maintaining a rigorous intake amount. Daily, I strive to drink at least number glasses of water. I am convinced that this contributes to maintaining a healthy weight and good health. I start my day with 2 glasses of water and try to consume as much as possible in the morning, as I might forget about it later due to work. I always stop by the fountain to share my drinks with the orchid. The cardiologist was convinced that consuming animal products, except for breast milk, is not an innate need. It is introduced into a person rather by habit. For example, if someone is used to very salty food, a meal without salt will seem tasteless to him, but if he gradually reduces the amount of salt, it will be necessary. According to him, any dietary pattern can be changed within 3 months. I grew up in a farming family where meat and milk were the main foods on the table, and I have been accustomed to this type of diet since I was a child. However, after I was 50, I decided to change my diet, focusing on whole foods, cereals, beans, and nuts. Sometimes I add small portions of dairy products, eggs, or salmon. Thanks to these changes, I feel great and now I am confident that I will reach 100 years of age, said URM Ellsworth. UORM was not just a heart surgeon. His well-being depended directly on his diet and lifestyle. He was convinced that proper nutrition and a healthy lifestyle could extend life by many decades. Even subtle changes in diet, he believed, could significantly improve health and increase longevity. Ori was a living testament to his beliefs, staying active and fit well into old age. I am healthy, I feel young, no matter how old I am, he said. The secret to renowned heart surgeon Michael DeBakey's longevity lay in the precision with which his heart worked, similar to a clock, and the cleanliness of his blood vessels, as clear as crystal. Michael DeBakey, a renowned cardiologist, believed that the key to maintaining a strong heart and a long life was regular walking. I strongly advise you to pay attention to your walking. At least 30 minutes a day, alternating between slow and fast steps to maximize the benefits in your daily routine, he recommended. He was very disciplined. He woke up at 4 a.m. His morning exercises included getting up and doing repetitions every hour. After waking up, he preferred to walk to work. Upon returning home, he went straight to breakfast. The doctor avoided following very strict diets. However, I completely eliminated oil-containing products and fatty meats from my diet. I prepared food without using oil, baked or steamed it, and increased the amount of vegetables in my diet. Eliminating these foods kept my heart healthy for 5 to 7 years, DeBakey said of his food choices. For breakfast, the doctor usually had cottage cheese or whole grain porridge sweetened with honey. For lunch, he usually had bean tea, supplemented with soup or baked fish accompanied by raw vegetables. DeBakey's dinner was divided into 2 parts. He had one portion in the evening and another in the morning after breakfast. He spent about an hour reading about scientific topics and literature. In the morning, He was ready to begin his day in the operating room. Michael DeBakey, a renowned heart surgeon, stated that the real adversary of the heart is not cholesterol or stress, which are crucial to get rid of intelligently. It is essential to be able to manage stress effectively. Many people choose to consume energy drinks for this purpose, not realizing that in large quantities they can cause a heart attack. It is preferable to find other ways to relax, such as attending the theater, connecting with nature, or simply swimming, shared DeBakey himself. In addition, he also dealt with stress and found relief in comedies, considering laughter to be the best medicine to avoid boredom. It is advised to reduce excessive oil consumption to maintain a long and active life. Michael DeBakey reached the age of 97 and, although while he was talking, his body began to fail in ways that were already difficult to correct. Old age is considered a disease. "I stay young no matter how old I am," said the doctor at the age of 70. He wrote his will preparing for the inevitable. However, his family discovered that he was unconscious and decided to operate on him. "When I woke up, I had the impression that I had already passed away and was in the afterlife, but looking at such modern hospitals around me, I wondered, am I really in the afterlife?" Even the sun was willing to be remembered. Recovery after open heart surgery was long, and he could no longer afford his usual walks. He frequently commented that time was running out. However, the doctor was not afraid of death. He was intrigued to find out what awaited him. He believed in the existence of the soul and life after death, something he often heard stories about from patients who had been resurrected. Leave your opinions in the comments about the advice of a heart surgeon and whether you think it is beneficial. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any updates. I wish you all the best and much happiness.